50 state laws, most of which mimic the federal act that has 5 schedules. And under the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, marijuana was placed in Schedule 1. Unfortunately, the definition of Schedule 1 is that the drug must have a high potential for abuse, which obviously marijuana has an incredibly low potential for abuse. It's almost impossible to hurt yourself from it. And secondly, the definition to be in that schedule is that it has no accepted medical use. Well, marijuana's been around as a medicine for more than 5,000 years. It was listed in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia up until I think it was 1942 or 1943. It finally fell out of favor after the Marijuana Tax Act was passed. But again, since 1995 now, we've had 15 states that have legalized medical use under state law. So it's incredibly difficult with a straight face to make an argument that marijuana deserves to be or qualifies to be placed in Schedule 1 either federally or on a state level, when in fact we know that there are tens of thousands of MS patients and Parkinson patients and AIDS patients and HIV positive patients and lots of other conditions and diseases who find marijuana to be an incredibly helpful drug to use, far more effective in many cases than prescription drugs. So we're left with this dilemma where theoretically, in most states and under federal law, marijuana remains in Schedule 1, suggesting it has no medical use, while in at least 15 of those states, it continues to be classified in Schedule 1 under their State Controlled Substances Act. So obviously, they should be rescheduled to a lower schedule or perhaps taken totally out of the Controlled Substances Act. However, our experience with trying to reschedule marijuana, both federally and on the state level, suggests that that may be a battle that we should not put a lot of resources into. Administrative reclassification is a terribly complicated process. NORML first raised this issue in 1972 or 73 when we filed the first federal action to reclassify marijuana out of Schedule 1 under the federal act. The DEA opposed us at every step of the way. We had to go to the Court of Appeals every time when they refused to make a decision or refused to meet a deadline. It took us 18 years, believe it or not, 18 years before we finally held administrative hearings. And at the end of those hearings, we had made a great record, and the DEA's own chief administrative law judge, Judge Francis Young, concluded that marijuana is one of the safest drugs known to man, and it should be reclassified so doctors could prescribe it once again. The DEA certainly simply rejected that conclusion and said under their discretionary authority they could refuse to follow the advice of their own administrative law judge. We took it to the DC Court of Appeals, and unfortunately the court let them get by with it. Now, there have been efforts in the last 10 years, have been 2 separate efforts being made. NORML's involved, but so are a lot of other drug policy organizations. It's a coalition effort, and we continue to keep pressure on the federal government to reclassify marijuana. But frankly, I think we will win it either in the courts or legislatively or by voter initiative years before we will ever win it administratively. So I'm not opposed to those efforts, but I would tell people, don't think just because you get marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 that somehow you've won a major battle. You haven't. Unless it's legalized, it's still not going to be available to the vast majority of marijuana smokers. And frankly, I think that time and effort and resources could probably be put to better use.